What is up, guys? It is Joe. We are back. We're talking ball about the Cats, specifically basketball today. And no, it's not about the portal. It's not jumping back into portal content, but it is about future recruiting in the class of 2025 with some massive news on the basketball court we'll talk about in today's video. But before I do, let me tell you this. Guys, if you're interested, please consider subscribing to this YouTube channel. It does help me out immensely. And I'm trying to make a video just about every other day, every couple of days, to get us through the offseason together and get this thing passed by so we can get on to football season here soon enough, and then trickle right into basketball season, and it will be great. So you don't want to miss that. Be sure and consider subscribing to this channel. But guys, let me jump in with this. Now, the other day, in case you saw it on social media, a big offer was given out by Kansas State's coaching staff. K-State basketball offered the number one player in the class of 2025, Dybantsa. Now, Dybantsa is the consensus number one across all four major, recruiting services. Obviously, the two we know primarily are 247 and On3, but it's also like ESPN and Rivals both also have him listed as the top player at his position, top player in his state, and the kid is a big deal. The offer list is ridiculous. I'll toss some highlights up as I'm going so you can get a feel for the kid. Shout out once again to our guys over at the Portal Report. They do a good job of broadcasting even future high school prospects like Dybantsa. And so that's what I'm playing for you right now with some highlights. Now, I will get it out of the way here. It is a lot tougher to scale high school highlights relative to what we've seen for college highlights. I don't want to make it sound like it's a one-to-one ratio of this kid's dominating high school kids. He'll do the same against college. But it gives you the idea of what type of player he is and the athleticism you see. That's the stuff that translates easy. So this is the offer list the kid has. And there's a ton of teams on this list. There's two currently, I believe there's two visits he has currently set up, or he's already visited Auburn on March 2nd. And then he's set to visit USC on October 20th. So a wide range, but he mentioned that he's going to cut down his list to about 6 teams following Peach Jam. But on the offer list, he has Alabama, Arizona Christian, Arkansas, Auburn, Baylor, Boston College, BYU, California, Connecticut, Duke, Florida State, Georgetown, Georgia Tech, Houston, Illinois, Kansas, Kansas State, Kentucky, LSU, Michigan, North Carolina, Ole Miss, Providence, Rutgers, South Carolina, Texas, USC, and Washington. As of right now, this could also update 1,000 more times in the next day because the kid is that, he's like a Cooper Flag type dude. You're the number one player in the class. Everybody wants you. Literally everybody wants you. But some people don't get, even the time of day. I mean, Arizona Christian isn't going to land AJ Dybantsa. Sorry, ACU. I don't mean to dunk on you like that, fellas. But AJ Dybantsa talked about his most recent offer. He posted on Twitter and said, I'm blessed to receive an offer from Kansas State. Thank you, God. He recently talked about his recruitment. I believe it was On3's Jamie Shaw who put this together, talking about a couple of different schools, like the two he has set for visiting in Auburn and USC, as well as BYU. It sounded like BYU was an unofficial visit for the kid, but he talked about Kansas State, and this is what he had to say. Kansas State was my most recent offer. They offered me today. He goes, I know they made a nice run at March Madness and they play an exciting style. I don't know much about them and they just offered me today, but I'm going to learn more about them. Now, I know that doesn't sound like, okay, stop the presses, the kid's committed to Kansas State. I'm not trying to make it sound like that, but I think it's an important thing to see based off the timeline. Now, I don't know the kid. I don't know what he's about. I don't know, he's the number one player in the class. He's going to go anywhere and be a one-and-done NBA type dude. That feels like the last bastion that K-State needs to cross off to have hit 10 out of 10 to get in these conversations with top 20 kids, with top 50 kids. You've already landed David Castillo. You've already had Nigel Walls on campus. You had Patrick Gongba on campus. These are guys that are program-defining commits if they come to Kansas State. I expect David Castillo to be in a similar vein where he is just an absolute dog. I mean, it's guys that are ready for college basketball a lot earlier on in their career. I wanted to say this because I think this is the argument I wanted to talk about in today's video. A lot of people look at it and say, don't recruit freshmen. The era of the transfer portal, just don't recruit freshmen. Now, I know it's a different game when it's the number one player in a state, the number one player, at his position, the number one player in the entire college basketball recruiting class. But there is an argument to say, do you recruit freshmen or do you just focus on the transfer portal? Where do you draw that line? This is the second year in a row that K-State's offered the number one player in the class. The previous season offered Cooper Flag. I don't think anyone really thought that was going to happen, though I did make a video on that, so that's on me. But I think a lot of people look at this stuff and say, well, Kansas State, if it's Bruce Weber, no disrespect to Bruce, it's a different program than it is with Jerome Tang. We are truly in an era where you can get a top 10 player in college basketball to commit to you. That's the world we live in with Kansas State's coaching staff. And the timeline here is what I want to talk about. This offer came a day after they signed Coleman Hawkins, or 2 days after they signed Coleman Hawkins. The staff wraps up the portal. They start focusing on high school recruits. It is all a process. You have to have the right mix of guys, whether it's young guys, old guys, all veteran guys, all young guys, whatever the case is. There's a give and take with that. Kansas State only signed one high school kid this season. That was David Castillo, who would have been a McDonald's All-American had he not, gotten injured in his junior season, or senior season, I should say. and got banged up a little bit and dropped a little bit in the rankings. Still was a top 55 player, top 60 player. He is an absolute stud, and David Castillo is going to be really one of the most underrated signings, I think, in all of college basketball. But if it's okay to say that a top 60 player is underrated, I don't know if I can even say that. But the point is, Kansas State has quickly flipped the narrative from, okay, we get these high 3-star kids or these mid-tier 3-star kids, and they quickly push into the 4-star conversation. I mean, Jerome Tang's first high school class signs multiple guys that are 4-star kids that would have been incredible additions for the Bruce Weber era of Kansas State basketball. Now we're looking at, you're in serious conversation with 5-stars. You're in serious talks with 5-star, top 50, top 20, top 25 guys. And I want to say this. A lot of times there's an example of, okay, we shouldn't take high school kids. If you get the opportunity to take the number 1 player in the class, obviously you do. I'm not just trying to, that's not the most groundbreaking thing I've ever said, but Darian Reed fits that example. Nigel Walls fits that example. Patrick Gongba, David Castillo. There's more names I'm forgetting that K-State's been tied to. Malik Thomas is another one that's a top 10 kid, I believe, in the class of 2025. But the staff knows what they can do. And I think Baylor's a good example of this. Like, Baylor seems to do this every year. And granted, they've won a national championship. They've developed the right way. They get guys to the league every single season. Scott Drew's, revered as one of the best coaches in college basketball every single season. That's why you see them do as well as they do in recruiting. But they understand the even mix of okay, you need veteran guys, you need young guys that can go play an ISO and do the right thing. AJ Dybantsa, if you didn't see it from the clips, he's an ISO guy. He can score in transition. He can score, with the ball in his hands. He can be a primary option or he can be a secondary option. But at some point when the high school kids match the talent level or the starting floor of those that are veteran college basketball experienced guys, that's where you start to consider this, because at some point there's that taper of, okay, we need young developmental guys, but the way the portal works, where there's no, repercussions for entering the portal, there's nothing that's keeping you saying, I shouldn't do that, it would negatively affect me. Doesn't really do that in a lot of cases. Sometimes you'll get, you'll enter the portal and think you're more than you're worth or less than you're worth, whatever the case is, but at some point, you look at the portal and say, well, there's nothing stopping me, let's jump in. That's why recruiting some of the developmental young guys, it's going to be a little bit tougher to advance them in their career if they can commit for 2-3 years, which is why I think we're moving towards more of that contract model in college basketball. Baylor does this every single year. They get a top 10 kid. This year it's VJ Edgecombe. Last year it was Jacoby Walter. There's a kid the year before that. Keontae George was the kid before that. There's a long list of dudes that have been proven one-and-done guys in collaboration with some of these superstar kids. Last year's a great example. Ray J. Dennis, veteran guy, comes from Toledo, one of the best guards in the country, and truly commanded that team in the starting 5. Had his best game of the season in the biggest moments in the NCAA tournament. But one of their biggest scoring threats wasn't always Ray J. Dennis. Ray J. didn't have to go out and score 15 or 20 for them to win every night because they had multiple pieces around him. So you look at Ray J. Dennis, experienced guy. Jaden Nunn, experienced guy. Then they have Jacoby Walter at the 3, who's a superstar one-and-done kid. He's going to be a top 20 pick here in a couple of months at the NBA draft, or a couple weeks at the NBA draft, excuse me. Same thing with Yves Misi. You had another guy that's going to be a top 20. I don't know that they anticipated he'd be a one-and-done kid like that, but he was one of the best bigs in the Big 12, and if not the nation, really, really fast. He has a lot of Joel Embiid to his game. That's the type of comp you see with him. I'm not saying you have to move to a certain model where you have to have experience and you have to have young guys, you have to have everything. But I think the staff understands where that give and take is. If the kid's maybe a top 200 kid and they're kind of well, his upside could be there. It's just going to take us 3, 4, 5 years. Well, not 5 years, 3 or 4 years to get there, 2 to 3 years. It's not necessarily worth the risk or the roster spot to hold them for 2, 3 years to try to get to that point. Some guys are different. Everybody's a different case, but I think I really trust the staff. It is not easy to get a Kansas State offer for basketball. You have to genuinely feel okay, these guys can affect our overall improvement in the years forward. Nigel Walls is a kid you take in a heartbeat. AJ Dybantsa, heartbeat. Malik Thomas. Any of these dudes that K-State's been linked to, there's a reason you're linked to them. It's a give and take of that. And I think Coach Tang does a good job of understanding, okay, this kid would be a superstar, one-and-done player, helps our NBA ceiling out and gets to the next level. But it's not always that simple. I mean, there's guys like KU had, I don't know why I'm blanking on his name, Elmarco Jackson, sorry. Elmarco Jackson, season didn't go great. Everybody thought he was going to be a one-and-done type, McDonald's All-American kid. He was a McDonald's All-American. K-State just landed might be Byfall, actually, the more I think about it. And he was a McDonald's All-American kid, goes to Arkansas. It didn't work out immediately just because he didn't see the court much, and he's still in college basketball. Some dudes you peg to be this, okay, he's one and done, he's out. The beauty of all of this is that if you can develop guys, you will get good players back. That's all of what this comes down to. You know, Keontae Johnson, you go to the NBA, you have a successful career already in the G League. Keontae will be a 10-year NBA vet. Similar thing with Marquise Noel. You go to the G League, you prove people wrong even further. You have an incredible March Madness run. You go to the NBA. I truly think Naquan Tomlin's going to hear his name called here on draft night. I mean, he's a superstar. He's really he's such a unique prospect as a whole, whether it's, shooting, dribbling, defending, rebounding. He can do whatever you need at a 6'10", 6'11 frame, defend 1 through 5, and be just fine on anything. You can switch him on anybody, whether it's the primary point guard or, the center. Like, he can do whatever you need. K-State getting more NBA representation is what's going to help in these conversations, as well as having some money, folks. Let's talk about that. Even though I know the numbers reported aren't correct in a lot of the Coleman Hawkins stuff, there's been some conversation about the private investors. There's been some different conversations, different things. I talked about it in a previous video. From my sources, the numbers weren't accurate that were broadcast. Not saying there's not money flowing through Kansas State, like we got that bag. The fact that players can see that and say, they got money, man. I look at it, they have some money over there. Even if that's what gets you to entertain the conversation, then you get there and you open your eyes and say, dang, this culture is something I want to be a part of. This team's something I want to be a part of. What can I do to be in Manhattan, Kansas? Anything that catches eyes of players and brings them to your college, I think you're doing the right thing. I'm not saying we're going to be throwing $5 million bags at AJ Dybantsa. I'm not saying that by any means, but the idea that Kansas State is in these conversations is incredible for the future of the program, and the outlook is bright. That's the biggest thing here. Will K-State get a visit? Maybe, we'll see. I mean, he's got 150 different offers, it feels like, but it's going to be up to the kid. I mean, does he really, truly want to learn about Kansas State? Because if you do, you start to get to know this coaching staff. You know Jerome Tang, you know Drew Dowling, you know all the different coaches on staff. It's hard not to fall in love with those dudes, especially like these dudes can develop me, but they're also a family. I mean, you see them fight for their guys. They're an all-black staff. They've had a lot of success of just going to bat for their players when they need to. And I think that stuff speaks volumes. If you're good people will want to come play for you. You'd be a good coach. You'd be a good representation of the university and get guys to where they need to go. Like, you get to the tournament, you get to the NBA. There's nothing else that I need to explore that says, okay, why wouldn't I go to Kansas State? There's definitely a conversation to be had here of which kids that K-State will reach out to offer to, which kids will have those K-State offers on their list. But as we get a little bit more out there, and I assume the staff's going to probably go full gear on future recruiting over the next couple of weeks. It's still a little early for the 2026 class, but never too early for 2025. Get them down, get some kids to a football game, similar to what happened last season with Patrick Gongba. And I know that didn't work out, but that's a great example of what's to come, I would say. I think you're going to get more of those 5-star, 4-star guys coming to Manhattan, and we'll see what the future looks like there. But that's going to do it for today's video. I just wanted to talk a little bit about AJ Dybantsa and where the Cats stand in that recruitment. We'll see if there's anything more that he says about Kansas State. I'll be interested and eager to hear that. But that's pretty much going to do it for today. I hope you're all doing well, having a wonderful day wherever you're at. I will talk to you soon. Go Cats!